Hi everyone. Today I thought I'd try routing a new sign for one of our many trails in the forest. I've done a number already and have been having a bit of fun doing those, so I'll show you the process today with a new sign, and afterwards I'll show you some of the other signs I've done of late as well. So there's a few steps involved. Figure out how you're going to lay it out on the sign, what type of font and stuff you're going to use for this sign. Now these signs I'm making are all freehand. I've only got a few lettering bits. I've got round-nosed bit, 1/2 inch, which is fairly large. I've got about a 1/4 inch V flat bottom bit, and then I got a smaller V bit. So that's all I've got. I don't have any of the real narrow lettering bits, so I'm limited as to the types of detail I can get on letters. So my letters are fairly simple, but I usually do design them myself just out of my head as far as how they look in the end. Anyhow, I'll talk a bit about that as we go along. Right now I've just got to cut the board to length, and then I'm going to lay out the letters on the sign. So here's the design I've put on the board at this point. The word, if you can see it, is, or the name of the sign is called Long Shadows. So you can see that the style I made has a large L for long and a large S for the shadows, and then large case letters, but half the size for the other letters, and they're up halfway up the board, whereas the full letters are centered on the board and the smaller letters are halfway up the board, basically the halfway line of the width of the board. I just thought it might be a different way to do it. Then I got a couple little trees, one on each end, that I might route out, not sure yet, with a narrow, with the V bit that I have, which isn't much. And then I was contemplating a few squiggly lines along the bottom, maybe to represent shadows. So here I've put the smaller letters in first with the flat bottom V bit that's about a 1/4 inches wide. Now I'll do the two large letters with the 1/2 inch round bit bottom. See how that goes. So there you have the basic sign at this point, just roughly cut in. This, by the way, is a 1x6 red cedar deck board that I'm using. We had a few of these left over from a deck that we were redecking, so I'm just using some of them for signs. It's a little bit, leaves quite a few splinters compared to pine, I think, but otherwise it's good and it'll last long outside. Plus I'm also putting some preservative type stuff on them, but which I'll talk about later. Now I'll maybe decide on the ends of the board how I'm going to finish it. So now I've just put my little V bit in, my small V bit. I don't know if you can see that there. It's about a 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch bit. I'm just going to use the tip of it, so I'm going to adjust the height on this plunge router so it just barely goes into the wood, because I want a fine line here for what I'm going to do. I don't want a thicker line. And I'm just going to etch in a couple trees one on each end, and maybe some other lines as well. I decided just to put one tree at the left end here and just a few of these little wave-like cuts along the bottom to try and represent the shadows, I guess. I'll remove this sign off the board, which I've nailed it to, just to keep it steady. Take it inside and I'll cut the edges here into a slightly different shape, or I may just round them over. That's probably what I'll do, actually, is just round this over a little bit. Then I sand it off, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so I've taken the sign down and sanded the top of it, and taken a bit of sandpaper inside the letters just to remove some of the burrs that were there as well. Now I'm just going to paint the letters and any of these little routed out sections with a black exterior acrylic paint. Now I put it in fairly thickly. Don't want it too runny so it seeps into the too deep into the wood, but you want to try and keep inside the letters as well as you can. Oh, sort of messing up there a little bit. Now, ideally, perhaps you could put a primer in here first. And I've done that with a few of the other signs, but I think it's probably fine without it, since I'm going to be putting a clear coat protective finish over this. Have to be very careful that you're just painting inside the letters. You don't want to make a big mess. You can see I'm being very careful here. Oh! In actuality, you don't have to be very careful, as you've probably guessed by now, because what we will do is when this is dry, all done and dried, I'll be taking a sander over the top surface and removing any of this paint that's sitting over the edge of the letters. You can also use spray paint, which would be quicker, again, but that leaves you with a little more sanding, just because you're getting paint over more of a larger area, basically. But both are suitable for doing this. Some people don't like to be even this finicky with a brush and stuff, so I can understand the desire to use spray paint. Again, this is a Western red cedar plank, deck plank I'm using for this sign. Part of the reason for that is that it's got good weather resistance, even though I'm going to be giving it a clear coat or a few clear coats also. And I probably could do this without a clear coat on it, but I thought it might be good just to give it a bit more protection. And I'm not sure if it really will, but hopefully it will give it a bit more life. It'll certainly stop it from going gray like a western red cedar does go after a few months outside in the rain and sun. They tend to go gray fairly rapidly, which is fine if you like that look. I'm hoping that these signs will stay a little more like their newly cut look, with a bit more of a reddish or a tanny color, I guess. You can see this process goes fairly quickly when you're not having to actually worry about being perfectly in the letters. Main thing you want to do is just make sure the entire inner part of the wood that's been cut out by the router gets covered in paint. This particular bit style here that I used is quite good for painting within, because it's got little sharp little sides on it and then a flat bottom, so it's good for getting the paint in. Okay, so there's the main letters done. Now I'll come back to this side here to get this little tree. This is the part I just put little thin lines from a small V bit, V-shaped bit, just to replicate or indicate a little coniferous tree. Because the reason I picked this name for this trail is it's lined with large hemlock trees that even on the hottest summer day, it's a nice trail to walk down and get into their deep shade, where it's always at least 10 degrees cooler under the hemlocks. I could have called it Hemlock Trail too, but there's lots of hemlock trails in the world, and we have another trail here that I've named at least a part of it Hemlock Hollow, because it had several big hemlocks in it. So this is one name I came up with. It's probably still not my the ultimate name I could have thought of, but just for the purposes of getting something now, I decided to go with it. There's the tree done. Now I've just got these little wavy lines here I'm going to fill in with some paint. Again, my thought with this was just to give an indication of the shadow lines, I guess. I'm pretty new to sign making, so these signs I've made that are pretty crude, actually, compared to a lot of people's signs on the internet. I'm hoping to get a little more into it with better bits and maybe a different router. The router I'm using is not really ideally suited to sign making. It's a big, heavy plunge router, and it's a little awkward to move around with any detail. So there you go. Everything's basically painted in. Now you just have to let it dry. So I'll probably let that dry at least for a few hours until it's fully dry before I would attempt to sand the top off. Here's the sign the next day after I've taken the sander to it and removed the extraneous paint that had come up over the edges of the letters as I was brushing it on quite roughly. And you can see what a nice sharp definition you get once you take that upper coat off, the surface coat of the paint. The tree and the letters and the little wavelets here underneath are all nicely defined. So now basically what I need to do is give this a clear coat. Now I don't have to do that. I could just put it outside like this and let the wood go gray and it would still look nice probably, but I've decided for most of these I'm giving them a clear coat of a protective finish. What I've been using for these, and I don't know if it's the best product or how well it'll last, I'm just sort of doing experimentally, I guess. Varathane Diamond Wood Finish, and it's a water-based product. So here's a few of the other signs I've made lately. Just mainly, again, these are trail signs for out in our forest. And the writing itself is basically just styles I've invented for the signs, given that I don't have many types of router bits at this point. So these first two signs on this side coming down are still natural. They have the black paint in the letters, but no clear coat covering yet. And then you can see the difference. This is one that has 4 coats of clear coat, exterior clear coat. And the same with these ones over on this side. Just gives them a deeper, richer look that will hopefully last like that, as opposed to going gray after a few months out. Just shows a variety of different letter type characters I thought of. And this one here, I just kind of like the idea of working the M and the A in together. Anyhow, there's my sign production process. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, I'm new to this, so I'm not giving any sage advice in that regard, but hopefully with time I'll be able to do a little more elaborate type sign carving if I get into it a bit more. At this point, not sure I will, but it's fun to just do some various little products with the router, sign making, putting edges on wood and stuff like that. Okay, thanks for watching.